Thank you very much, Margaret. And thank you, Senator Klobuchar.
Well,
Thanks
Matt.
to all of you for joining us this morning. So,
It's pretty impressive at 7:30 in the
I
morning.
know. Excited to talk about pharmaceuticals and cost.
Yes.
So, I want to take you back. We were all so young and fresh-faced. It was last December. And
so much hope.
so much sunniness and optimism. It was another age.
That was before I was displaced by Melania Trump as the most famous Slovenian American. That time.
You were, at the time...
She was actually born an hour away from my relatives.
Wow.
As I said the other day, every time I look at her, it's like looking in the mirror. But so that is that time. I'm back there now.
I've said the same thing.
Okay.
You, at the time, last December, you called drug policy, drug pricing, one of the priorities of the year.
Yeah.
Fast forward to October 2017. How has that priority changed, if at all?
Well, I think it's become even more important when you look at the numbers and what's been happening. You know, we're proud of the fact that pharmaceutical companies employ so many people in America, that they've made all these incredible, innovative discoveries, and that is all good. But at the same time, like any business, if a monopoly falls in their lap, they go for it. I'm the ranking on antitrust, and we've seen that across many other industries. It's not just one. So what has happened since that time? Well, things have only gotten worse. The numbers have gotten worse. You're going to hear today 870,000 Americans spend over $50,000 a year on their drugs. Think about that. In 2015, the U.S. spent an estimated $457 billion on prescription drugs, which is a 30% increase from 2009. And 1 out of 4 Americans either cut their drugs in half if they have pills, or they take less than they're supposed to, or the woman from Minnesota who saves her insulin injector every day for just the extra drops, because the prices of that basic drug of insulin have gone up 3 times in just the last few years. 4 of the top 10 selling drugs in America have gone up over 100% in just the last few years. So this is not just EpiPen, or it is not just insulin, or it's not just Shrek, how do you say his name again? Martin.
Yeah,
Shkreli. That was who's this good person there? It's not just Martin Shkreli. I memorized it, Belly, and then I forgot. Shkreli. It's not just him, right? One guy going to jail. No. It's a systematic issue across our American healthcare system. So it's gotten worse, and in terms of what's happened as a priority, one of the things I was heartened by was that the president, all through his campaign, had talked about allowing Medicare to negotiate prices. And I put it more simply that there's a ban in law that says that 41 million Americans, all seniors, can't negotiate better bargains, and they're pretty good at doing that, you know. But they're not allowed to by law. They're banned. And so the president has said many times he supports lifting that ban, which of course kept in through the Affordable Care Act and debate and everything else. So this could be a real moment for him to seize this issue. And so we just haven't seen that yet. He hasn't backed away from his position, but he just hasn't done anything yet. So we would really like to see change there. And then as far as Congress itself, there was one memorable vote on the drugs from Canada, I picked up was my amendment with Senator Sanders, although it's almost identical to a bill that I have with Senator McCain. And we picked up like 14 Republicans. So I think there is movement. What my colleagues say, especially my Republican colleagues, behind closed doors is different than maybe what they say publicly, but they are all really concerned. Not all, that's not fair to say. I'd say 5 or 10 of them that I didn't expect to ever bring up this issue have brought up this issue to me. So I think there is some clear knowledge that this is a problem and that we need to do something about it. And for the American public, it is one of the top problems. It's the top problem in healthcare, one of the top problems in all the polls that they identify. And as Abraham Lincoln once said, public sentiment is everything. until you run into campaign financing. But it should be everything, and it eventually will be everything, and we will get this done.
No, there's a lot in that answer, and I want to
Really?
come back to I want to come back to some of the specifics, but I want to talk about the growth in spending for a moment. Part of that it's attributable certainly to market dynamics. Part of that to an aging population, but some part of that is we're in the middle of an explosively innovative moment in pharmaceuticals right now. And do you worry that that intervening and sort of putting a bigger regulatory structure on top of pharmaceutical research and development at the moment will perhaps hinder that innovation, and that we wouldn't know it until a decade after it's happened?
No, because I am not talking about regulating their research or their innovation or even their approvals. In fact, I've been all in favor of speeding up approvals for both for pharmaceuticals and medical device to get life-saving drugs or life-saving medical devices out sooner. What I don't like is that we are in a capitalist system, and I like that, but I don't like when it's not working because we're not allowing competition in. So you are correct that for rare orphan drugs and rare diseases, I actually head up that caucus with Senator Hatch. You will have drugs come up that you want to make sure are able to be launched and get out there. And that is part of the issue, but that pales in comparison to the fact that we have mainstream drugs that have no competition. Like, for instance, what just happened with EpiPen, which was resolved after public pressure came on, right? It would have gone up 3 times the amount to $600, $800. So that's why I think if we believe in capitalism, and that means we have to have competition. Otherwise, this is never going to work. So how do you get there is more the questions that I get to while still allowing innovation. In my mind, competition fosters more innovation because you have to find lesser expensive but effective and safe ways to deliver drugs or to produce drugs, and it means that you're going to innovate because you want to get in front of your competitors. Well, that just doesn't happen when when you have only a few people charging high rates. So we get back to some of these solutions, which is to put some things in place to assure more competition. Number one, generics. There's something called the CREATES Act that Senator Leahy and Grassley and Senator Lee and myself have put out there, and that would make it easier for generics to sample the drugs from the big pharma companies so they can get their products out in the market and how they do the safety protocols as well. Senator Lee and I have a bill that would trigger allowing, that's generics. We also have, one other, Grassley and I have a bill we can talk about more to stop the practice of pay for delay. I talked about it at the debate a week ago, which seems like a month ago.
Do you think that's going to get any traction?
I think it will, yes, because I would we need a vote. And if we have a vote, I would challenge, I can't see people like lemmings voting with the pharmaceutical companies, even though they're the biggest contributors. I can't see that happening when you have to explain to your constituents why you're going to allow a practice in place that says that the big pharmaceuticals can pay off generics to keep their products off the market. $2.9 billion taxpayers would save over 10 years. That is the Congressional Budget Office score. And I think that consumers would probably save an equal amount because of the co-pays and things like that. And so just think about it. Here you not only have less in competition, you have competitors paying each other to keep their products off the market. And Senator Grassley feels pretty strongly about that bill. So if we could get it up as a vote, as an amendment, most likely to a bill, I think it would be really hard. That's one of those ones I think would pass in the Senate. I just do. Because it would be hard to come up with arguments against it. They constantly are throwing safety in our face about drugs from Canada, for instance, which I think is somewhat absurd because we put in there clear safety protocols and which kinds of drugs and how they have to be able to pass muster to come into our country. But that would be my third bucket of things. So you've got things to promote generics, well, first you have Medicare Part D on their own, but then you have negotiation. You've got things to promote generics, things to stop generics and pharma from helping each other so there's no competition. And then you have things to allow more foreign competition. You could just straight out allow it. You could straight out allow it for certain countries, the reimportation idea. And that's the bill I have with Senator McCain. Since we can see Canada from our porch in Minnesota, we like that one, right on our border. But you could also do it like Senator Lee and I have some version of this. You allow a trigger so that if you have a certain drug for which there has not been competition for a certain amount of time, or there's limited competition, then you could allow the drug to be reimported from another safe drug from another country. So it kind of hangs out there so they know that that's going to happen if they keep stomping on competitors.
You have, as you've noted, reached across the aisle a few times on a few pieces of legislation with Senator McCain, as you've mentioned, with Senator Lee. But we've seen over the past few months much more failure of legislation on health care in Congress than success.
Well, it depends on what you propose.
So what would you say is the legislative pathway that you're looking to have some of your priorities succeed?
Well, for instance, we did pass Medufa and PDUFA, but then they got a new name because the name sounded so weird. But those were the bills that allowed for the FDA. It was basically FDA reauthorization, but allowed for funding actually from industries to help fund some of the reviewers so that we can move these products along more quickly. So that did pass. I'm hopeful we'll be able to get the CHIPS bill done eventually. And then we can talk maybe at the end here about the work of Senator Murray and Senator Alexander. I'm hopeful on that too. So I think some things have gotten done, and certainly over the years we've gotten a number of things done in healthcare. I think the issue is that we need to fix the Affordable Care Act, and the reason you've seen these failures is because these have all been bills to basically get rid of the Affordable Care Act, to repeal it, to kick millions of people off health care insurance, to the last version, the Graham-Cassidy one, to severely cut Medicaid, and all kinds of things that were out there that started to bring very strange bedfellows together so that, you know, the insurers and AARP and Kasich and Bernie Sanders were all on the same side. That means a trouble for a bill overall. So, you know, those kinds of things were happening. So I think you can't really measure whether we can move on health care or not by these latest votes, because I think those votes were smart votes in terms of saying this isn't the way the public wants to go and we have to do better. On the other hand, you've got this big mammoth bill, the Affordable Care Act, and you can't pass legislation of that magnitude, nor have we done that in the history of America, without then coming in and making some changes as time goes on. You're going to have problems with it. And we've had some issues with the exchanges. That's one of them. The second one is what I've identified here, the drug prices. So I think it's easier, as I hope we will show in the next month or two, to make some changes to stabilize those exchanges and bring costs down. Delivery system reform is hard sometimes because some states like mine are more cost effective than others, and that's hard. But we could make more changes with delivery system reform if you talk to someone like Atul Gawande. And I've always been a proponent of that, and I thought we didn't do enough in the first bill, though we got a good start on it. You could do something again, and I'll go back to our topic here, on pharma prices. So how do you do that? Well, one way could have been with the Medufa, PDUFA type thing, the FDA reauthorization. That didn't happen, and that was kept off of there on the committee level. And so my guess is it'll be more like amendment votes in the Senate. As you know, if you're going to bring up a whole bill by itself, it takes a week or so, and leadership on both sides basically has to let you do that. And we've just been unsuccessful to date in trying to get those bills up. So I see this more as some major amendment vote to some other bill, whether it's an end-of-year bill, whether it is the health care bill that they're working on now, although people will really want to preserve that. There's just got to be some way And I think you're going to start seeing the public outcry against both parties if we don't do any votes at all on any of this. The Democratic Party is very interested in pushing the Medicare Part D negotiations. I lead that version of that bill in the Senate and will be leading that amendment. And the president has said he supports it. So maybe, lo and behold, that could surprise everyone and something like that happens. I'm just not certain, on what bill we will vote for that. And what will happen, will some Republicans join us on the Medicare Part D? I think the one thing we could say is votes have been unpredictable and exciting lately. So we really don't know. We don't really know what's going to happen. When Rand Paul's over there going over to Speaker Ryan's office with a camera and a copy machine trying to find the first version of the repeal bill, I didn't really think I'd be retweeting Rand Paul, but I did it. And so I think that, you just don't know what's going to happen here. So I'd say the Medicare Part D is going to be the big emphasis. On the Republican side, I'm not sure which bill that they would see as the least onerous. But, you could see that pay for delay one. It can be a pay for in a bill. That could be in some who knows what bill, right? Because it raises $2.9 billion. So you could see it being stuck in some health care bill to pay for something. All the importation bills, those are probably the hardest, although we picked up 14 votes on the Canada one. We also passed the drug shortage bill. I led that with Casey and Susan Collins. And that bill surprised everyone when it passed, and it really only happened because John LaPook of CBS Reporter, who I didn't even know at the time, started asking people at leadership press conferences why they weren't letting the drug shortage bill come up for a vote. And then all of a sudden it got on the agenda, it got through the committee after we'd been trying for so long, and then it passed, and then he won an Emmy. So just for any reporters out there, I just want,
Thank you for the tip.
No, but I just think, I think that people, he won an Emmy for that, not for something else. I think that the more that people can start talking about these individual proposals as opposed to just drug prices are high, bring them down, disaster. I just think that would be interesting. These are not crazy proposals. They're not like, they're all individual things attacking one problem.
So let's tunnel in for a moment on the nature of this particular market. I mean, you talked about all being good capitalists. Yes, competition is a key vehicle for reducing prices, but healthcare and prescription pharmaceuticals, especially above all, is this fiendishly complex system. It's not straightforward. One of the criticisms of your approach to preventing what you call pay for delay agreements is that it would effectively hand over a bunch of power to the FTC. Adding another regulatory layer on top of a system that's already slow in getting treatments to patients. But how do you think about introducing new regulations and new requirements in a system that's already as complex as it is? How does that actually reduce price?
Well, in a way, I want to have less regulations in some things. I don't want to have that regulation that says Medicare can't negotiate prices. So I want to allow for the seniors to be unleashed. The silver tsunami coming at those drug prices. I'm going to get in trouble for saying that because it's too negative. The silver surge coming at them. So I think, I think that that's not necessarily true when you're trying to sort of unleash an entrepreneurial spirit among our population. As far as the FTC, I mean, sometimes the argument made on the pay for delay is that it's somehow necessary to settle patent suits and things like that. And the Supreme Court actually had a ruling where they decreased the number of those pay for delay agreements anyway, because it used to be saving even more money. And the world didn't come to an end. So I just don't see that is going to cause Armageddon to happen here. I just don't. Nor does Senator Grassley, the chair of the Judiciary Committee, or he wouldn't be leading the bill. So there's that one, and then the drugs from other countries. I mean, every other industry in America has competition. The last time I checked, from foreign companies. You know, we prefer to have all this in America, right? American companies. But when you have American companies that keep jacking up their prices, you've got to bring in some competition to bring those prices down for consumers. And I actually think some kind of trigger where those companies would come in. Now that gets into really interesting regulatory issues. What is the trigger? How do you measure it if prices go up for a certain drug? But if we could find some way to do that, my guess is that would have a really nice effect of keeping prices down, because they don't want the competitors to come in.
Do you think that the U.S. should have a role in effectively subsidizing pharmaceutical innovation for the rest of the world?
I think the U.S. should have a role in innovation. I mean, that is one of the reasons that we have such a strong pharmaceutical industry, such a strong medical device industry. We have seen some government-funded research as part of what has been good for our country. It's why we've been able to be a leader in so many areas, and certainly you've seen that everywhere from the internet, that Al Gore, remember, invented.
Yeah, I do.
Yes, and he was like, no, but you saw you saw that in many, you know, the original Bell Labs that then led to our innovation in that area, and then of course later that went away, and then we had the breakdown of the Bell companies that went to a much more competitive situation. Or you look at energy, with the energy research that goes on. I think ag research, Bill Gates comes every year and talks to me and other members of the ag committee about ag research and exciting things like barley rust and stuff like that. Why?
This is a crowd that seems like it would be exciting.
Okay, but they didn't cheer, but he sees that as part of how we're going to fix the world, how we're going to feed the world, right, with this kind of ag research. So I always think there's a place for that. I think the more interesting question is then, well, did the U.S. government get to get back some of their money if these companies are making so much money off their research? That was actually a case that was brought with I think it was a letter raised by members, including me, and then there was some litigation over it, but it was to try to recoup some of the costs for the government that they had made. There's an argument there, but no, I've always believed in that. So
let me come back to the price hike around the EpiPen, which you called the proverbial canary in the coal mine. What did the canary tell us? What do you take away from that?
That there's a lot of moms out there that can get really mad really fast, and that you found out, as I'm a mom with a kid with a severe nut allergy, and the minute I heard it, you also find out that there aren't that many moms with kids with nut allergies in the U.S. Senate, considering there are only 21 women senators. And so I knew immediately that this was Armageddon, because I knew that it's not just one EpiPen. They have to have one at school, you know, one with them in their pocket or their purse, one at home, 2 get lost a year, and the whole thing. And so how much money that is, that's a lot of money. And so what happened there, I think the story there is just much more about public pressure and how, but not every drug is going to have that public pressure, right? Drugs for people in the later years of their life, they might not quite get that kind of social media presence like they did, or 1,000 people stopping by my state fair booth filling out cards about why they were mad about the EpiPen. But that really hit people hard, because it was a mainstream drug, and that people understood this shouldn't have happened, and individual people had seen the costs go up, right? Like over 5 years, they'd actually seen it happen, so they knew, and then suddenly they realized, oh no, this isn't just my health plan, because it gets so confusing, right? This isn't just because I have a new insurance company, no. This isn't just because of this is because there's no competitors and I'm stuck getting this one this much. So the company eventually responded with the coupons and bringing the cost down, and then getting the generic out. I don't know where it is right now, but it did go down fairly dramatically. But you just should not have to launch a social media campaign and have people like lining up in front of your state fair booth in front of Bob's Snake Zoo, that's where I'm located, to bring the prices down of drugs. You should be able to get them down because you've got some rules of the road in place that incentivizes competition. The last time I checked, that's the kind of system we're supposed to be living in America. You know, we're not North Korea.
So one more question for you, Senator. Why prescription drugs? It is part, certainly, of the growth in spending, but this is, again, a complex system with a lot of different costs. For a lot of attention accrued to the price hike in drugs and treatment for hepatitis C, for example, but the argument was made that we actually saved money that would have gone towards hospital visits and more expensive inpatient treatment. So why have you made prescription drugs the centerpiece of your priorities?
Well, two things. Number one, it actually is a lot. It's been growing. It's nearly 20% of our healthcare costs. When you include drugs used in the hospital setting, it's nearly 20% of our hospital costs. So that is not a small thing to mess around with and just say, oh, well, that's a problem, and no one wanted to do anything about it, so it's there. The second reason is because someone must do it. And honestly, the average contribution to a member of the Senate, I was asking them back in the green room what they thought it was, and someone guessed that it was for 1 year in 2016. Average was like, someone said, oh, $20,000 is $75,000. So the pharmaceuticals are incredibly powerful, and that's fine. They have the power to do it. But I think there's got to be a few people willing to say, look, let's take this on in a big way. And there's a bunch of mavericks involved. That's kind of fun, you know, McCain and Grassley and Bernie and others. And so there are a group of us that really want to take this on. And I think eventually something's going to have to change. And I hope the pharmaceutical companies realize that because we just can't keep going the way we are. So part of why I take it on is that I want to step in and do it. I tend to be more bipartisan than some of my colleagues. I had one of the highest or the highest record last year of co-sponsoring or sponsoring bills that passed. And this is an area where I've actually found some Republicans who are willing to work on it. And the last thing I'd say is right now the major focus is getting Lamar and Patty's work through. I think that could be a major help for the exchanges and shoring things up and show them good faith that people are willing to make some changes to the Affordable Care Act. And my hope is that will then pave the way to some prudent moves that we could make on pharma prices.
Senator Klobuchar, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.